Hello guys, it's Rito here, and today we are going to take a deep look at comparing all the three Stormcast Chambers. Because I guess people who are playing Stormcast and who own Stormcast armies will be interested in seeing which of the three warbands suits them best and which might be the best points per value. So as you can see here, I've prepared a slide for each of the Stormcast Chambers. So if you're going purely off number of different options, clearly the Warrior Chamber is your top choice because that is a lot of models. Anyway, let's just let's start off with the Hunters because those were the first ones to come out. So the Stormcast Hunters, they only have a few models. Obviously, they have basically the long strike crossbow, they have the hurricane crossbow, and the Vanguard Hunter, and then a prime version, like a leader version for all of those three. On top of that, they get the Either Wing and the Griff Hound. Now, let's have a look. Again, we'll look at the damage per point value, which is calculated by looking at the average damage per activation that one of these fighters is doing divided by its point value. So the Vanguard Hunter with long strike crossbow will in one activation do 3.7 damage on average. That equals only 0.2 in terms of points value. Now you've got to remember that he has a long range, and fighters with long range generally don't get very good damage per point values in the statistics because I can't show range in this. So being in the red here isn't too horrible in my opinion. Looking at the activations to be killed, that's 5, which is pretty good. And then again though, because his points are very high, this isn't great point value in terms of how survivable he is. Then we've got the Vanguard Hunter with Hurricane Crossbow, and as you can see, his damage per point value is very, very good. Well, if you compare him to melee characters, it's still only going to be average, but in terms of a ranged character, I think the 0.03 is a very good value. Anyways, he has the same kind of survivability the the long strike crossbow has. They have the same defensive stats, but because he is quite a bit cheaper on points, he gets a higher ranking here in terms of point value for activation skilled. Right, then let's get to the Raptor Primes. So looking at the long strike crossbow again, you can see he's doing the exact same damage that the normal long strike is. His profile isn't different at all, but he costs a lot more points, so that knocks him down to being in the lowest tier of damage. And yeah, he's very bad damage for point value. He does take 7 activations to be killed, which is quite nice again, and I like that. Just in case you didn't know, I'm basing all of these values on an opponent with these stats. So I'm saying this is an opponent with toughness 4, 4 attack, strength 4, damage 2, 4. So this is the opponent I'm theoretically pitting these fighters against. Just so you know what we're basing our values on. Anyways, I think the Raptor Prime long strike crossbow is a very, very bad model. He's just a lot of points and doesn't offer anything that the normal Vanguard with long strike crossbow can. So yeah, I don't like him. Then we get to the Raptor Prime with Hurricane crossbow, and he has basically the same issue. Again, he does the exact same amount of damage as the Hurricane crossbow without Prime does, but he has more points, so he'll end up coming out worse in terms of damage per point value. Again, he has 10 wounds more, so he's more survivable. It'll take 7 activations to kill him, but it will come out to the same kind of points value because, again, he's more expensive. So again, I just take the non-prime option there. Then we get into the Vanguard Hunters. Now, the standard Vanguard Hunter is again with 0.02, not great in the damage department, but not horrible either, because he's a lot cheaper in points. You can see 3 isn't great average damage, but he's a lot cheaper than many of the other options, so I think it's might be decent bringing him. He only takes 5 activations to be killed, just like the other guys. He has the same profiles again, and because of his rather low point value, again, he's looking pretty decent. Now looking at the Hunter Prime, I think when I saw this surprised me a lot. I wasn't surprised that his damage is horrible, because again, it's the same damage value the Vanguard Hunter has, and again, we have a higher point value on the Hunter Prime. However, what did surprise me was this. This is the only model I've looked at so far that has a 0.04 on this, so it's the only model that does really well in terms of point value per activation that it takes to kill them. So basically, he's one of the cheapest fighters you can get who needs 7 activations to be killed. So in that regard, I think the Hunter Prime is pretty good, if you want something just very survivable that'll stick on the board. And then I think we get to what makes this warband truly interesting, which are the Aetherwing and the Gryph-hound. The Aetherwing comes in at 45 points, which is very, very, very cheap. And although he only deals out a pitiful 1.5 damage in each action, that'll still give him a decent damage output per point value. Obviously, he is killed in a single swing by most opponents. He's only got 6 health and 2 toughness, so yeah, he's easily killed. But again, in terms of point value, that isn't too bad, honestly. And taking into consideration as well that he has a movement of 12 and can just jump around the battlefield to get on objectives and stuff, I think he's quite worth his money. Yeah. Then we've got the Gryph-hounds. And the Gryph-hound is very similar to the Untamed Beasts big dog. So it's movement 6, not movement 8, as the Untamed Beasts Rocktusk Prowler is, but apart from that, he's basically the same. And he does very good damage. As you can see, he does an average of 5.4 damage per action. And coming in at 150 points, I believe it is, yeah, that's very good damage per point value. And equally, it takes 4 activations to kill him, which isn't that quick, and for his points value, again, not bad on the average. So I like this Gryph-hound as well, and I like his double especially on top of that. So, sorry, his ability, I think it might be a triple as well. Whatever, but I like that a lot. So yeah. Overall, I think this is a decent warband. With the Gryph-hounds, I think you have pretty good fighters in general. You have some very high mobility with the Aetherwings. The Hunter Prime is pretty survivable, the most survivable for the points value that you can find anywhere. And the Hurricane Crossbow is pretty good damage at range. So I think if I'd personally build a list, I think I'd go for the Hunter Prime. Throw in 1 Vanguard Crossbow, maybe 2, and fill up the rest with 1 or 2 Aetherwings and Gryph-hounds. So just get as many Gryph-hounds as I can, because I feel like they are very good fighters. Anyways, moving on, we'll look at the Stormcast Warriors Chamber. I'm going to be a bit quicker in this one, because this just takes a lot of time, because they've They've used all the Liberator versions, they've used all the Judicator versions, all the Paladin versions. You can see there's just a lot of models in here. So let's just be pretty quick about this. These 4 models, they all have a one-handed weapon and a shield, which results in a very bad damage output. Remember, these are close range options, and for close range combat, this is very, very bad damage value, so I can't advise bringing them. In terms of activations to be killed, of course, Stormcasts are all very tanky, so no surprises there. It takes a lot of time to kill them. They have all toughness 6. But again, in terms of point value, it's good, don't get me wrong, but it's not the greatest. So I don't know. I don't like these guys too much. Looking at like the double hammers, the greatsword and the great hammer out of the liberators, you can see that their damage goes up significantly. Especially the great hammer and the great sword, who are almost the same damage values here, 7.4 and 7.1. Those are quite interchangeable, and yeah, as you can see, the damage per point value for these guys is actually pretty good. I like both of these models a lot. I think they are quite nice, and you might really want to bring them. As you can see, they take the same amount of activations to be killed as the Liberator with Hammer by this opponent I've got here, which is due to most opponents you're going to face are not going to be Strength 5. So so the Toughness 6 is only really going to give you a benefit if your opponent is Strength 5 or above. Otherwise, the Toughness 6 is just wasted points, and you're much better off going with the Great Hammer or Great Sword. Then we get to the Judicators. These are the Judicators. Don't go for the Skybolt Bow. It's just plain worse. The damage values are worse, and yeah, it comes out to a worse damage per points as well. All of these 3 options, the Boltstorm crossbow, the Shockbolt bow, and the Thunderbolt crossbow, are all pretty decent. You can totally go for them. Just something to keep in mind is that apparently the Boltstorm crossbow is the cheapest out of them, so even though they all have the same survivability, his kind of points per value are the best. Yeah, but of course his total damage output is a bit lower than for the other guys because his points are lower as well. Then we've got the primes for the Judicators. Honestly, guys, don't bother with those because their damage isn't worth it. They don't do more damage than the normal Judicators do, and they just have more wounds. I don't think that's worth bringing at all. You're just getting worse damage per point value. Looking at the Paladins, we have all those options. The Paladin primes struggle mostly because they... Oh god, I said prime there, that's embarrassing. Okay, prime. The primes suffer a bit from being more expensive than the normal guys without actually adding a lot of value. I mean, the Spear Prime, he does more damage, but in terms of like points per damage value, he's not a lot better. Same goes for the Great Axe. Really, it's the Great Hammer that takes the cake here, though. The Great Hammer has good survivability, it's not too expensive, and you are getting a very nice damage outputs here. At 7.1, that's pretty good. Same goes for the Leader. The Starsoul Mace even has higher damage output than that, but you'll see his point cost is going up, so while his damage per point value is still fine because of his higher damage, his survivability isn't better than the other guys, and therefore his point value is lower. Looking at the Prosecutors. Now, obviously the prosecutors are very difficult to put into this whole warband. The reason being is that most of them have ranged options, and ranged weapons, as we've seen, don't do as great on this kind of damage per point value statistic. Also, they have 10-inch movement range, which is also not shown on my statistics. So there's a lot of things that increase their point values without actually showing them any additional benefits on my basically scale here. So just keep that in mind. If you want to go for something that's movement 10, I would still totally go for it. I don't think you should go for any of the ranged options because honestly, you have better range options, right? You have all these judicators who can dish out quite nice range damage, and you don't need to be able to move a lot if you're going to go with ranged anyways. So I don't like the ranged guys here, the trident, the spear, and the hammer with the double hammer guys. Yeah, I don't really feel like you need them, and they don't deal a lot of damage at all. You can see like 4 damage on one activation. That's horrible for a 300 point model. Yeah, then we have the great weapons, great hammer, great sword, and great axe. Again, their damage is so much better than the damage by the guys who only have like a shield and a one-handed weapon. So yeah, drop the shield, go for the two-handed. It's the way better option. And as you can see, the survivability doesn't really change in terms of point value between all the prosecutors. So going for one of these 3 is probably your best bet. All right. And then let's have a look at the Stormcast mages. These have a lot fewer models, which is nice in my opinion because it eliminates a lot of cards and having to look at too many options, which are very similar anyways. So yeah, let's just have a look here. We have the sequitors, sword and hammer, again very similar. The hammer actually doing worse damage than the sword because he has less attacks, just more strength. In general, more attacks amass more damage. So his damage per point value is pretty bad. His activations to be killed are fine. I'm not going to talk about this much because all of them are equally very good at surviving. So yeah, let's just focus on the damage here, right? These guys, they have toughness 6 again. As I said, that doesn't really matter if you're fighting a strength 4 opponent. And it's not going to matter a whole lot as well if you're fighting a strength 5 opponent, but you'd see a difference then. But anyways, I can at the end of the video just show you quickly how this would change if we change the strength of the opponent. Anyways, moving on, we have the sequitur with the leaders. Again, better survivability, still bad in terms of damage output. Yeah, same for all of them. I think the lantern guy, he has a very good ability. I can't quite recall what it is off the top of my head, but I remember thinking it was good, so he might be worth bringing over the other guys just because he has that lantern. Then we get to the Grand Hammer again, and again the great weapon two-handed guy takes the cake here. Out of all the sequitors, he does basically double the damage the other guys do in terms of point value, and yeah, no reason not to bring him at all. Then you've got the Castigators, just 2 versions there, the normal Castigator and the Prime version. The Castigator actually at 0.03 is doing very good damage for his point value. I think in terms of ranged characters, that's pretty nice. Don't bother with the Prime, he does the same kind of range damage but is higher points. And then we've got the Evocators, and the Evocators, yeah, they do very good damage. The normal one, as you can see, is on 0.04, which is high, and so is the leader. So yeah, I like both of these options a lot. The staff, again, it is higher strength but lower attack value, which just doesn't pay off as much. So I'd say go for the normal evocator and the evocator leader as well. This is my favorite leader option for sure. So which of these warbands do I think is best? To be honest, I think the Stormcast Hunters probably take the cake. Having these two options just makes them a lot more flexible than most of the other warbands. Having a 45 point model that can go 12 inch is very good. Having a 150 point model that can go 6 inches and deal out quite significant damage is also very good. So I like both of these a lot. I think the Vanguard Hunter isn't bad and the Hurricane Crossbow isn't either. Sorry, the Hunter Prime isn't bad and the Hurricane Crossbow isn't either. For the Warriors, I'm afraid you'll have real movement issues. I know they get a double to move if one of their friends gets injured and stuff, but yeah, let's face it, movement 3 on the Paladins is horrible. The Liberators don't do the greatest damage, although I like the Greatsword guys. And yeah, the Prosecutors, they are just very, very high points. So even looking at the Great Hammer, Great Sword, Great Axe guys, they are all going to be 250 odd points. That's expensive. That is very expensive. So you're only going to look at like 4 to 5 models in the entire warband, which I don't know, I don't like as much. Looking at the mages, I like the Evocators, I really do, and I also like the Sequitur Grandhammers. Don't like the other Sequiturs at all. Like they might as well not be there. It's horrible damage per points. Yeah, the Castigator isn't bad, but they can't do anything that the other two warbands can't. So yeah, whatever. Anyways, they are not that special to me, and I'm not sure they will be the best out of the bunch. So I'd probably go with the Stormcast Hunter, but please let me know your opinions. These are strictly my opinions based on the numbers I've calculated, and yeah, let me know what you think, and hopefully see you in the next one. This is Rito signing off.